It is now 2 past the starting time. I think we should get started. People will still trickle in, but let's get going. We don't want to delay the session. So welcome very much to this digital discovery session put on by the United Nations Environment Program. My name is David Jensen. I'm the head of digital transformation for UNEP, and I'm also UNEP's focal point inside the Coalition for Digital Environmental Sustainability. And I know a number of folks from CODES are here today, so very much welcome to you. The goal of these digital discovery sessions is really to do a 1.5-hour deep dive into a specific application of digital technology to accelerate the SDGs and environmental sustainability. We're trying to do this in a peer-to-peer safe space learning format, colleague to colleague, where we're sharing lessons, sharing insights, and really trying to compare knowledge and help each other on our respective digital transformation journeys. And of course, within UNEP, data and transforming our data systems is a major challenge. We have 38 different data platforms. We're trying to federate those into the World Environmental Situation Room, and this is a huge challenge to solve. And the reason we're here today is because this is a similar problem that's been solved or being solved in the humanitarian space by the Humanitarian Data Exchange. And we really wanted to learn lessons on what you have done and how you've gone about solving this problem. So today we have 3 colleagues from HDS with us. And I have unfortunately lost my speaking notes. They won't open on my screen. So I'm going to do a manual introduction. We have 3 colleagues. We have Sarah Telford, who's heading up the Center for Humanitarian Data. She's going to open and lead the session. We have Javier Castro, who's also a part of the HDX team since about, I think, 2014, a key member of the team and a key statistician on the team. And we have Dan Mihalia, who is also a key member of the team, focusing on the data architecture and back-end infrastructure. So welcome all 3 of you. Thank you so much for spending the time today. And thank you to colleagues that organized this session. So why don't we get started? Sarah, why don't we pitch it over to you? I think we're going to try to, as always, organize this into a number of interactions where we have sort of a 10, 15-minute presentation, then we have a discussion, question and answers, and we do that a number of times. So Sarah, over to you to lead us through the amazing HDX platform and how did you build a world-class data platform? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, David. And can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I think we have some slides. I actually didn't know who was going to share those. Is that with your team or mine? Did you? Okay. I see.
Studio will share them.
Okay, good. Okay, great. So why don't we just jump in? Thank you so much for having us. We're happy to share what we've learned. I always kind of get taken aback when people would say something like a world-class data platform, because we're just trying to bring data together to make it easier to find and do analysis. So our ambition was actually quite humble, although very difficult to do. So we appreciate the feedback and that you want to learn from us. So I'll just take you through. I think I have maybe 10 slides on more at the high level. My colleague Javier will go into more of the platform itself and some of the things that we have there, and then Dan will go really into the technical details for those of you who make it to the end of the presentation. So the center was established in August of 2017. The Secretary General came in December of that same year, 2017, to open it, which we were honored by. And so we've been around almost 5 years now. And really, HDX came before the center. And the center would not have existed if it weren't for the success and traction that HDX had. So, HDX itself was still very new. We launched it in 2014. And it had a couple of years where we were kind of testing it. And then I think really for the center, what we saw in terms of why we wanted to create it was that there were many challenges that we didn't think could be solved with just a data platform. There were many other issues. So data policy, data literacy, and data use, all these issues that we thought, okay, well, the HDX in itself, although it's helpful, is not going to solve these broader ecosystem issues. So that's why we created the center. And I think the next slide is really just our goal, which is to increase the use and impact of data in humanitarian response. So it's quite broad, but really an evolution of the HDX goal, which is to make data easy to find and use. And so here we're like increasing the use and the impact of the data. And then the 4 work streams, I think, is the next slide, which is data services, which includes HDX, but also some work on data standards, which I think has been more difficult, and we're happy to kind of talk about that. But we have the Humanitarian Exchange language that we use more for the HDX backend, but we've had trouble getting adoption of that just on single users for different reasons. And then we also support IOTI, the International Aid Transparency Initiative. And then predictive is the newest work stream. Actually, when we launched the center in 2017, we didn't have predictive. We added that in kind of our second phase, but it's really supporting OCHA's anticipatory action agenda, which is really trying to use data and models to get ahead of crises and respond before the sort of worst of the impact. And so that's really interesting space, and we're happy to talk more about that as well. And then data responsibility is really making sure that the safe, effective, ethical use of data, and that touches on HDX, because obviously we don't want data shared on HDX that could expose individuals or put people in harm's way. So Javier will talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing to ensure there's a quality assurance process and the data isn't exposed that shouldn't be. And then of course data literacy is really under kind of a foundation for all of our work, is making sure that people can use the data. And so that focus has been on more non-technical users, the humanitarian affairs officers within OCHA, but we do also support some more technical literacy work. And of course with the COVID, we haven't been able to have very many in-person trainings, but that's changing. And this summer, we're going to have a number of workshops. So I think in terms of the next slide, where are we? Our team. We are a distributed team. So this has been really valuable in terms of how we're set up. So it's not just, data being kind of sucked out of the field to some headquarters entity like a vampire. It really was important to us that we build local partners and local trust. And so that started with Nairobi in 2014. We set up what we called then a data lab, but it was never really a lab. But we had 3 people there doing outreach on data sharing and really trying to make the case around HDX. And I think that was super valuable. We still have 2 or 3 people there now. And then we expanded to Dakar in 2016 following the Ebola crisis. And then, like Dan, our lead developer, his team is in Romania. We have obviously people in New York and Geneva, but then lately we've also brought in some people in Asia, so in Bangkok and Jakarta. And yeah, I think that's one of the keys to the success. If we get into the case study later on, it's really because of this geographic distribution, that I think it's been successful in some ways. The next slide is on the platform itself. So I don't know how many of you have used it. You're probably familiar with it. But again, when we started in 2014, we had maybe 600 or 700 data sets, mostly development. We kind of bootstrapped the system. So that was a good thing that I learned. We had an advisory group at the time, and we had someone there from Google. And he said, you just got to get data in there so that there's a reason to go to the platform in the early days. Which is what we did. And, since then, so now we have 19,000 data sets, which seems like a lot, but it's really more just how the data is sliced. So in terms of the number of countries or the number of indicators, the World Bank data, for instance, I think is 5,000 data sets. And that's just because of the way that it's split. So in terms of like really core data, we talk about the data grids, and that's like the 20 or 30 top data sets, like the most important data sets per crisis. And Javier will go into that a bit more, but that probably, by the HRP locations, so the Humanitarian Response Plan locations, I think let's say there's under 30. So 30 times 30 data sets is really the core of what we're talking about in terms of some of the most valuable data. Sorry, Suji. So in terms of what humanitarian data is, and I know that UNEP sort of bridges different areas. You have, and you can go to the next slide, Suji, the sort of environment, and you have other areas that you're working in. But in terms of how we understand humanitarian data, it's really in three buckets. One is the data about the context. So the place it's happening, some of the development data, baseline data, the geographic data sets, admin boundaries, socioeconomic indicators, just like what is happening before the crisis. And then there's the data about the crisis itself. So who's affected where, what do they need? And that's kind of related to needs assessments and understanding, the impact of the crisis, and then the response. So who's responding, what are they providing, what's missing, how much funding is available, and the kind of monitoring, and rarely impact, but if we did have that, we would also show that data. So those are the buckets that we're talking about. And then I think, in terms of how we evolved, so if you go to the next slide, it's really the first use case we had was with the Ebola crisis, and we had only just launched HDX in 2014. I think it was in July. And the Ebola crisis was actually happening then, but it really peaked in the fall. And so we were approached by UNMIR, the UN mission, to say, could you be the platform of record for our data? And, as a new platform, we really actually stopped and thought about it and said, are we ready for this? We're not that robust yet. This is important data. And we all agreed to go for it. And so one of the first data sets that we brought on to the platform was, and I'm sorry to say this hasn't changed that much, although there have been other things that have progressed, but was taking a PDF sitrep from the government or from WHO and extracting the tables for the number of cases and deaths in different countries. And we created this CSV file and put that onto the platform. And then that was used. That was our most downloaded data set for years and years and years. And then, of course, you can see the New York Times pulled that down and made this graphic that was on the front page of the New York Times, website for a day, but then also would have been used, in other places. So it just, for me, this kind of spoke to the power of open access and open data. And I think this is why people saw potential, and having an early use case like this, an early impact story, is really important, and something that leadership looked at and said, oh yeah, that makes sense. Then from there, we really worked with some early organizations. So the next slide is the one with WFP. We basically knew we needed some high value data on the platform, and thanks to Javier, actually, he had a very good partnership from the Ebola response with the World Food Program. They were sharing some specific West Africa data sets. And then because of that good partnership, we then convinced them, or I should say Javier probably convinced his colleague to come onto the platform and share all of their food prices data, which was a massive amount of data. And to really make the case, we said, we will build you a visual, a custom visual, which we did. And that visual still sort of lives on. And you can see this is the COVID Data Explorer, but some of the food security data is within that, and it shows that it wasn't a waste of time. It really kind of laid the foundation for using this later on. And then I think the next slide is more how we've evolved. So whereas we had a single data set for food prices, now we can bring, I think, this COVID Data Explorer that we developed 2 years ago now, or a year and a half. Really, it brings together 60 data sets from dozens of sources. There's a very sophisticated process for how we integrate the data behind the scenes and create the data pipeline. We add hexel tags. We have a front-end developer who does all of the data viz work, and it's all custom. And this, I think just the takeaway on this is that we really had the buy-in from the business side. So within OCHA, it's the operations and advocacy division, the sort of desk officers. They really engaged with us and said, well, what we really need to generate talking points and to do our analytical reports are these 10 things, or, and it was kind of a conversation that lasted over months and months. And where they would say, we need this, and we would say, we can't do that, or this isn't possible, or we don't have the data, or we can do that. And really the product came out really well in the end, and it's still very popular. I mean, I think it's been visited by, you know, hundreds of thousands of people over that time period. And then, you know, you'll see when Javier talks, we now have replicated this for the Ukraine crisis. And so that again shows that you can do something once, and then you have all of that code and all of that knowledge on the team, and you can do it for other things. So we quickly were able to stand up the Ukraine Data Explorer. And I think a couple of final slides are more on just this is more just what else we do. I mean, we create data stories, which I think is helpful in terms of advocacy. So kind of matching the data and the analysis with a human dimension. And we've created, I think, 4 of these. We did ones for South Sudan, Chad, Yemen, and then more recently on the climate crisis. And I would say, you know, these are a lot of work. It takes a couple months of just like many people contributing, but it's really powerful to be able to kind of, you know, support these human stories with the data that we have. I think that maybe the final 2 slides are more on the HDX growth. So, you know, and these are just as of last year. We haven't updated them for this year, but we have seen the users grow over time. Organizations, you see the big dip in the upper right-hand corner. That's because we cleared out organizations that hadn't shared data. We had that happen where organizations would get approved and they would be allowed to share data on the platform, and then we'd never hear from them. And so we kind of archived them, and now we monitor that quite closely. And in fact, we had a fellow over the summer who looked at this issue of like, what is the time frame for organizations that are new to share data? And if an organization comes onto the platform and does not share one single data set for 6 months, then they never will. That's the analysis that we found. So it's really important for us to have that early engagement, and you know, to really see, like, is this partnership going anywhere, and can we help you to kind of really get used to the platform and share your data? And sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. Either the organization isn't ready, or you know, you have a technical sort of person within an organization that's really excited about sharing data, but then they don't have the permission. So there's different reasons for it, and you know, that's fine. And then data set growth it's pretty stable. We did introduce archiving, which is helpful. So some of the old data that really isn't relevant anymore, going like, I think it's 5 years back, we start to archive. And that, I think we kind of got archived maybe over 1,000 data sets, and that's kind of a continual process. And then you see in the bottom one is the cost over time, and that's gone down. So it's very expensive to begin with per user, and also just the upfront cost that you have to put into user research and, you know, hiring a team and all of that. But then as the platform grows, you know, and the cost to stabilize, I wouldn't say that it's gone down. I think our budget is about 1.7 to 2 million a year for HDX. And specifically, I mean, the center overall is probably 4 million. So, and that has been pretty stable, I would say, from the first year. So I think there was a hope with management, like, oh, once we do this, then it's going to be cheaper. And it's like, no, it's not cheaper. It's just the costs are the same, but you're going to get more use. And so the cost per user will go down. And then the final slide is really on how we thought about, I think just 2 slides, and I'm sorry, I'm almost done. The case study. So we've been asked many times from partners like you know, can you explain how you did this, or can you just, so we worked with the UK government. They actually gave us a research grant, and just took the time to write a case study. I mean, I actually wrote it because I think most of the memory is in my brain. So it was really good though, just to say, like, how did we do it? What were the key points? And how can other people learn? And so these were the 11 takeaways. I mean, I could circle all of them because they're obviously all very important, and you can sort of pick the ones that resonate with you. But given that Dan will speak after me, the agile development and open source we found to be really helpful. Because it's transparent, it's also reusable, We can change if things aren't working, and we're not tied to a license. So all of that has been very valuable, and I think was kind of unique. Everything's on GitHub. It's kind of unique in the UN at the time. The influential partners early, I mean, that was the WFP story, bringing in the food prices data. I think once other organizations saw like WFP was sharing food prices data, that gave them permission. They were like, okay, so then now we can join, or well, we want to be there as well. And so soon after it was like UNHCR. And I remember, as an early team, we would be kind of celebrating, like, oh, look, we got UNICEF finally joined the platform. And there would be a lot of enthusiasm about that. And then, of course, I mentioned the geographical distributed team, which I think, can also be, you're pulling from many, many different offices and locations. And maybe just to say, my favorite is stick to your knitting. I had met a woman from the World Bank, and she, we were kind of at a pivotal point, like, which way do we grow and what do we do with this platform and getting into other areas. And she said, Sarah, you should just stick to your knitting. Like, what is the thing that you need to do well, and just keep doing that well. And that, to me, it just never left me. I mean, it's still with me. Like, I think, well, we actually have it on the board here. Do the right thing, do it well, do a lot of it. So I think that, we have to kind of stay focused. And a lot of the work we do now is really on maintenance. And then the final is really just, slide is on the center, is what we call flywheel. So how do we create momentum within the center? And we've kind of identified these 3 areas that create momentum and that feed into each other. And so it's like the data that comes, the partnership that we build because of that, and then the trust that sort of comes out of that. And then that keeps going. And it's helped us to, grow into other spaces like data policy or data responsibility now. Also with predictive, and it's like, we have a reputation, we have these relationships, and we can build on that momentum. And we saw that with the Ukraine crisis, once again, it's like, we really need this data or that data. And it's like, okay, we just got to call ACLED or REACH, or, we got to get in touch with the World Food Program, and those relationships are there. So that's it for me. Sorry, I ran over a bit, but over to you for any questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a great, great presentation. I love those lessons learned. I mean, almost all of those resonated with our experience. I see a couple of hands up, so let me go right into the questions. We have a question from Danny Gaffari. Danny is one of our key data gurus who works a lot on SDG data. Danny, could you turn your camera on and go with your 2 questions, please?
Thank you, David. Sorry, I'm connecting using my mobile phone. The first question, thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. The first question is about actually who has access to upload the data. Is it open? The CSV upload, I saw an interface in one of the slides. And is it open or only is for registered users? And the second question, how the back end, the interlinkage between different data locations. So you have different locations, how you exchange data between those locations. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny.
Sure. So yeah, it's completely open. You can go there. You don't have to register, and you can download data. And that's
Can you upload data?
No. So let me get to that. Yeah, uploading, you have to do it through an organization. So, and not as an individual. So as an organization, if you wanted to share data, you have to submit your application, or through the platform, to say this is a request to create an organization. And then Javier and his team get that, and they review the request. And there's certain criteria, like, is this data going to be relevant to the humanitarian community? Is this organization trusted? These kind of things. So that's the process. And then once the organization is approved, they can share data 3 ways. One, openly to everybody. The other is privately, so just with their membership. So, in terms of their group that kind of comes with the organization. And then the third way is called HDX Connect, which is a way to just share the metadata and not the underlying data. And we use that for more sensitive data, or data that, really has strict humanitarian use only, and we can't really know that in terms of the platform. So yeah, that's how it works.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Sarah? How much of the platform data sharing is based on an API framework, and how much is kind of manually uploaded? Do you have a sense of the 2?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the stats, and maybe Javier and Dan do, but I would say what I do know is there has been a growth in API sharing over the years, and that's something that we measured, and we knew that if that started to happen, that would be a success indicator in terms of the maturity of our community. So yeah, I don't know, Dan or Javier, if you want to jump in, if we know that percentage.
Yeah, it's about 40 organizations that they share data API. Many others, because of their size, they do uploads manually. But many big organizations, they have, connected to us via API. So it's like about 40 out of the 307. So, I'm not good with numbers, so it's about that percentage.
Yeah. A statistician is not good with numbers. Okay. I'm teasing you, Javier. We have another question coming in from Pooja. Pooja is our amazing head of web. She's also on the digital transformation task force. Pooja, do you want to come in with your question?
Thank you so much. I'm calling in from a mall. I didn't want to miss this one. This is a fantastic platform. We've been watching it for a while, getting inspired. And I think my questions are really based on a couple of things. Given the current trend of where data platforms are going, where, you are slicing and dicing the data, I'm just wondering if there is, I saw the downloads or the uploads. I'm just wondering if users can slice, dice the data and extract any insights from it at the moment. And my other question was if you did any specific work on API design. Thanks.
Thanks, Pooja.
So I think, oops, someone talking. So just to say, in terms of slicing and dicing the data, I mean, absolutely, people that are pulling this data from our API or even just downloading it. I mean, I think it's an infinite number of things that can be done with it. And I think the proof in terms of what's possible is some of the work we've done on the COVID Data Explorer, the Ukraine Data Explorer, which really is an integration of many data sets, many sources. So yeah, I think that's certainly happening. In terms of the design of the API, this is not something that I can speak to. So I don't know if Dan, if you have anything you can add to that question.
Yeah. So as I will show in my presentation, the SICN, the platform that we are currently based and developed, has a very powerful API. In terms of basically what you can do in the UI, you can also do in the via scripts via API. Also, you'll see that we have some preview of the data that is automatically previewed based on the Hexel tags and Hexel standard vocabulary that we implemented. So if you want, you can slice and dice the data and preview it nice. It still didn't implement it after filtering and doing some filtering of this data. You cannot still download that data, which is not very complicated, but it's on our list. Basically, if you want only 10 rows out of 1,000, we don't currently have it right now, but it's on our list.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
If I can just add, there is another add-in that we have put on HDX that you can see some insights of data sets. It's called the quick chart. So basically, the way it works is that once you have a data set with the Hexel standards and you upload the data set on HDX, you can immediately see some summaries of the data. So how many counts, how many rows. Let's say the data set's about refugees. So immediately, once the data set's on HDX, you have a distribution of the refugees in a country, of the total number by gender, by age, as you wish. And that has been quite useful for our users. So they don't have to download the data set, open Excel, create a pivot table, and immediately, once the data set on HDX, you see these insights that has been quite popular and quite appreciated by our community.
Perfect. Thanks, Javier. 2 more questions, and then we'll move on to your session, Javier. I see Danny has asked a follow-up question, which is, are any standards used for the data exchange, for example, the statistical data and meta exchange standard, Can you tell us about the standards? And then I have a question, which is when we were building one of our previous data platforms, unknown unknowns were really quite deadly. And I'm wondering if you hit any unknown unknowns as you built a platform, what they were and how you navigated them. Thanks.
Well, maybe I can start with the unknown unknowns. Although it's hard to know what was unknown and unknown. Give me an example. Do you have one?
I mean, in our case, it was how difficult it is to start to do overlap and analysis on multiple geospatial data sets at a scale larger than country. The moment you get up to sort of regional or global scale, the ability to process multiple layers it just sort of our systems just kind of collapse under the weight of even if they're cloud-based and Google Earth Engine based, it's really slow. So anything like that where, or for example, we had a situation we were allowing crowdsourcing of story maps, and people were telling stories with our data where the stories were not necessarily accurate, right? So they were sort of, pushing out stories on a UN platform using the data, but the narrative wasn't accurate, right? So they were politically motivated, so we had to shut that down. So things like that you didn't anticipate, or maybe unexpected consequences of what you built that you had to address.
Yeah, and sorry, I just dropped. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
I mean, there's so many, and we don't have the time, but I think a couple things come to mind. One was, I mean, you talked about standards. So we use something called the Humanitarian Exchange language, which was like in its infancy when I first kind of heard about it in 2013, and it was a very complicated standard. It was like, I can't even remember. I think I blocked it from my mind. The way that they had designed it, it was, very difficult to understand. And you'd spend half an hour explaining all of that before you even got to like, why is this valuable? So we got some money from the Humanitarian Innovation Fund and really stripped it down and made it more simple, which we now say it's a simple standard for messy data. And I think the investment we put into Hexel has paid off in terms of our own platform. We, our data engineer, Mike, who's based in New Zealand, I mean, I don't think he could do what he does without Hexel and all the work that goes into our data explorers. But I think the thing that surprised me was how difficult it would be to get adoption beyond our own team. And we spent a lot of time on tooling and sort of explaining and training, and it just hasn't worked. And so I think that I wish I had known that, because I think we probably spent a lot of time and money on something that, I don't think it was ever going to be what we thought it would be. But that's one. The other is the curation. We started the work with trying to curate data, and we had this idea of sort of like 600 indicators across all countries, and you could just query the database. We spent a lot of time on that. It was called CPI, the curation process, something. I mean, this is a long time ago, but that did not work either. And so that was a difficult shift, and this agile development, and we kind of moved towards just the CCAN framework, which is really uploading data sets. It wasn't like a database. There's no like curated database behind all of this. They're individual data sets. That's not to say like in the future that we could do something more curated, but I think it's really challenging. And then the final thing that maybe Javier will get to is really on the sensitive data, which we were a bit blind to because it's an open platform. And it's like, yeah, everyone share your data, no problem. And I forget what year it was, but we got a message, a private message on Twitter, which I appreciated that it wasn't public, but from a colleague at UNICEF saying that there was a data set that had been shared by a group working in the Rohingya camps, that if you do analysis on it, that you could re-identify women who've been sexually abused and their locations in the camps. And it was kind of horrifying. It was like, whoa, that's terrible. Like this, we got to stop. So obviously we took it down and we had conversations, but that led to, a couple of years of really hard thinking about like, how do you ensure that there's safety around an open data platform so that there is no possibility, like zero tolerance for that type of data to be exposed. And even though it's a lot of work, I feel safer at night because that we put all that together. And now I think, you know, it would be very unlikely that that kind of data would get through our system. So
Great.
I don't know if I answered everything. I think there was a more technical question, and maybe Dan, was it on?
There's a question at the very end about geospatial. Is geospatial data included within in the HDX platform, and is it included within the standard you're using?
So actually, we're having a geospatial data workshop the 21st and 22nd of June. If you have geodata specialists, we'd love to talk to them before the workshop. It's an internal workshop, but we're trying to really understand user needs around that because yeah, we have hundreds of administrative boundary data sets on the platform that part of the OCHA common operational data sets, the CODs. And they're in all sorts of file formats, and it's really improved over the years in terms of quality. But yeah, in terms of, you know, ArcGIS and sort of being able to see all the layers at once and new functionality that we've really started to listen to and people are asking for, we do not currently have that. What we do have is obviously getting the data, but also geo preview, which we need to kind of refresh, but the ability that you can actually see the file, but it only previews the top file, and often there's, you know, it's admin 0 or it's admin 1, and it's really not that interesting. So we want to do more with geodata in the future.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I think on that note, let's pass it over to Javier for the second presentation on HDX. Javier, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I think you can hear me. So thank you, David, again for the invitation. It was nice to see you again, and I'm very happy to share some of our lessons learned with your community. So so you can put next slide. That would be good. So as Sarah was mentioning before, HDX was launched by OCHA in 2014. And the goal has been for all this year to make data easy to find and easy to use for analysis. Today, after almost 8 years, you can find data on HDX from every single crisis in the world, from Afghanistan to Yemen, but of course, a lot of relevant data sets about the crisis in Sudan, in Syria, in Somalia, in Myanmar, in Nigeria, just to mention some of the top crises in the world. Next, please, Suji. Today, there are a bit more than 300 organizations, and I put this slide just to illustrate some of the great partners that we have had since the beginning, since the inception on HDX. I wish I could put all of them, but you know, the slide is a certain size. So, for example, now, as Sarah was mentioning before, WFP has been sharing data about global food prices in the beginning, so you can go to HDX and find global food prices at the market level for a bunch of countries. And this data is being transferred to HDX via API. So as soon as the data is ready, validated, and curated in WFP, it's shared to HDX and available for our community. WHO is also sharing a bunch of data sets from health facilities, but also data about the crises that are in the world. So from the beginning of HDX, they've been sharing data about the Ebola cases, Ebola deaths, the Ebola treatment centers, and now recently all the data related to the COVID pandemic cases, deaths, vaccination, the COVAX programs, everything about that crisis. Another great partner that has been with us since the beginning is IOM, sharing data about the displacement tracking metrics that are super relevant for humanitarian response. But there are many other partners that are sharing data on a constant manner. So FuseNet, for instance, or IPC, data about food security. We have a lot of geographical data sets, either coming from WorldPop about population density map, but also from UNFPA about the boundaries of a country, population density as well, population distribution. So this is just some of them. As Sarah was mentioning before, these are trusted partners, and we are like an extended family. We know each other for many years, and the exchange of data has been, fluctuating in a nice manner all these years. Next, Suyi, please. These are some of the statistics that I wanted to share with you, just for you to have an idea of the impact that HDX is having the recent years. So for the consecutive second year, we have surpassed the million users on HDX. So at the moment, there are 1.4 million users that are coming to HDX looking for data sets, exploring some of the 19,000 data sets that we have on the platform from more than 1,800 different data sources. And the resources that we have on HDX have been downloaded a little more than 1.8 million. So that's also a nice statistic that allows to say, yeah, things are working, people are coming to the platform, but also reviewing the data sets, getting insights using the quick charts, but also downloading them for them to use them for analysis. Next, Suji, please. As Sarah was referring before to the definition of humanitarian data that has to do with data about the context of a crisis, affected people, and about the response. These are some of the other data sets that you can find on HDX. So shapefiles about boundaries, shapefiles about population density, all the socioeconomic indicators from the World Bank, of data sets used for preparedness. You can find them on HDX. And then data sets really related to the response. So data about refugees, IDPs, asylum seekers, people affected by a flood, by an earthquake. All this data is available in the form of Excel files or CSVs, or in the case of geographical data in form of shapefiles. Then about the response, so you can find easily the TWs. That's one of the OCHA's best sellers, the typical product of the work that we do. So you find Excel files with who is doing what where, soon after a response, data about funding as well, and also the data behind the humanitarian needs overview report. So all the people in need, people affected, the planned people to be reached, and so on. So all these data sets are available on HDX. Next, Suji, please. So if you could go next slide, that would be good. Okay, whenever the next slide comes. So of course, making data available in one place has, with no doubt, bring a lot of efficiency. So humanitarians, even school children, academics, journalists, they don't need to chase their personal contacts to find a data set that they need for a humanitarian crisis. Now they can come to HDX, look for the data and download it. In case they don't find that data set, they can reach out to us and our team, and then we try to do that partnership with the organization in order to make that data set available on HDX. One example of this efficiency that we have created is the Ukrainian Data Explorer, and we can share the link for you to navigate and play on the actual visualization, but maybe just for sake of time, I can use this GIF. So basically, this Ukraine Data Explorer came as a response of to support our colleagues in Ukraine soon after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So what this Data Explorer wants to say is to put all the data related to the crisis in one simple visualization. So at the moment, we have a little more than a dozen of different data sources about the refugees, about the IDPs, the number of attacks on health facilities, on education, the funding, also conflict events in Ukraine. We have also the 3W that is coming directly from the field in this visualization. So if you have time, you can come to the Explorer and navigate on the different fields that we have. It has been really a successful development, been used by our colleagues in the field, has been used by top management in the sector, and really puts together all this data. And we couldn't be able to put this dashboard together if we didn't have HDX in place. So having the trusted partnerships and also the focus advocacy that we have done to put all the relevant data together is paying off on developing this type of dashboard. Next, Suji, please. So this is a slide that we put together just to give you an indication of the crisis where we have been supporting the colleagues and the community with data sets. So as Sarah was referring before, we started with the West Africa Ebola crisis, putting together data from WHO. It was a nice story, putting data sets from PDFs, converting them into a Google spreadsheet, and then making them available on HDX, all the way to the Ukrainian crisis that we are supporting as well. So, but in between, we have been engaging with organizations, pulling data sets, sometimes even converting data from PDFs into Google spreadsheets or CSV or Excel files to make them more actionable. So what this slide wants to say is that the dots in green represents the number of organizations that they were sharing relevant data about that crisis, and the lines that you see with the tick marks are the number of data sets. So as has been our world, in recent days has been an explosion of data, and you can see reflected here as crises appear, more data is available on the platform. Next slide, Soye, please. So I was mentioning before that there are approximately 19,000 data sets on HDX, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit hard to find relevant data sets. So we have created something that we internally call, or actually now it's externally called, the HDX data grids, that we work on that in 2019 as a way to help our users in their quest to find relevant, complete, timely data sets. So the data grids bring together a limited set of foundational data sets needed to understand the context of a crisis. And in that way, we can compare the availability and also the quality of those data sets. So the data grids include 6 categories. One has to do with affected people. Another one is coordination and context, food security and nutrition, geography and infrastructure, health and education, and population and socioeconomy. So there are 6 categories on which, under those categories, we have about 21 subcategories. So one category is, let's say, affected people, and the subcategories are refugees, IDPs, people in need. So in that way, we can provide to our users one place where they can come. Let's type, let's say, Afghanistan. They go to the data grid page for Afghanistan, and they see this grid with the most relevant data sets that we believe are like the minimum to do a proper humanitarian response. Next, Suji, please. So data sets can be included in a data grid if and only if they are relevant for the category. So we're talking about, let's say, refugees. They are part of the affected people category. So we are looking for a spreadsheet that contains data about refugees at the subnational level. Then the data set is considered complete if it has a broad coverage, is sharing a commonly used format, and is up to date. So those are the 3 conditions. So first of all, in order to be a data set on the data grid, it has to be relevant to the category and subnational. So one figure for a country about refugees is not enough. We need to have that number at the subnational level. And then the curation of those data sets depends on these 3 categories. That is in a machine readable format. It's kind of also the first step to enter into HDX. We don't take PDFs. I mean, I'm sorry to say we are enemies of PDF. That's useless. This is very hard to use that. So it has to be in a CSV or in an Excel file or in a shape file. And then has to be cover a large part of the country, and then it has to be up to date. So depending what is the frequency of dates of the event, that determines whether or not a data set is up to date or not. So those are the conditions that we follow and we curate in order to do the analysis of the data grids. Next, Suji, please. So every year, like about 31st of December, we cut the analysis and the data hunting and curation of the data grids. And by mid-January, end of January, we prepare a report. It's called the State of the Open Humanitarian Data. So we do analysis of all the data grids. So in this case, we have one data grid for each of the 27 countries for which there is a humanitarian response plan. We do an analysis and we write a summary of that. So this year we came up with an estimate that about 69% of the relevant complete crisis is available across the 27 locations. Afghanistan and Central African Republic are the countries with the most complete data grids. So we have been finding a lot of good data and a good collaboration and cooperation with our colleagues in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and in different provinces, but also with the community through the IMWG. And Afghanistan is on the top, followed by Central African Republic. Other countries with a good amount of data in terms of completeness and availability in a machine-readable format are Chad, DRC, and Sudan. On the other side, unfortunately, we have been finding a lot of data gaps in Colombia, Venezuela, and Libya. Big gaps on the availability. And whenever we find some data, it's very old, from 5 years ago or 7 years ago, or sometimes doesn't even exist, that data. So details of this analysis can be found on the State of the Open Data report, and I can share the link soon after my presentation. Next, Suji, please. We do the analysis at the country level, but also at the category level, so you can see where we have some gaps. In terms of categories, we have been finding a lot of challenges to find data about humanitarian access, also about the transportation networks. Education facilities is very hard to find. Health facilities as well is hard to find. So you can see in blue are the data sets for which we have found good data. And the one in gray is because something is missing, and in the white spots is because there is nothing that we have found. Next, Suji, please. And I just have a couple of more slides. So very briefly, just to talk about the quality process that we follow on HDX. So every single data set that comes to the platform is reviewed by my team. So we make sure that the data is, first of all, relevant for the community, that has all the components of the metadata so users can use it. So metadata is super important. I mean, I think I don't have to say it here in this forum. I know everybody agrees with me. So metadata is key. So we make sure that the data has a source, has a methodology, has a date stamp, so users can use it in a proper way. The data set has a license, so we know how we can reuse it or not use it, and also whether or not there are some caveats on that data set. So unfortunately, the humanitarian data is, by far the perfect data. So as we say, as long as you know what is the caveat, what is missing on that data set, you can use it, accommodate it and see if that data is fit for what you want to use. So we do a lot of effort to make sure that metadata is complete. Also, as Sarah was mentioning, we make sure that the data set doesn't have any sensitive data that could put a community, a person in danger. So we have an algorithm that runs on every single data set and looks for some sensitive information, names, demographic information, data that combined with other variables could identify somebody. And then once we have that flag on alert, we run another algorithm. It's called the statistical disclosure control, that we follow one algorithm that was developed by the World Bank, and that algorithm gives you the probability for somebody in that data set to be re-identified. So it's basically just running a livelihood based on combining different variables, different combinations, and bootstrapping that effort just to come with the probabilities. That probability is high. We put it apart, we talk to the organization, and we try to reduce that danger that data set may have. Sometimes we have to remove variables, sometimes we have to hide some rows, but we do this in collaboration with the organization that share that data set. I would say this is kind of the chunk of our work on daily basis. We do a lot of work behind the front page of HDX, trying to make sure data set is relevant, but also safe to be shared on the open domain. Next, Suji, and that we'll finish with that last slide, just to share a little bit of what's coming next. So what's coming next? Well, I hope after this, UNEP can be joining HDX. Also that maybe other partners are interested to share their data on the platform. So that would be fantastic. Also, as part of the data grids, we are introducing a new category that has to do with the climatic hazards. So that data has been proven to be essential and super important for nowadays, not only for the community is asking for that, but also because my colleagues on the predictive analytics team are using this data for anticipatory action. So we are starting this year, we are introducing a category that will be looking for Excel spreadsheets, CSVs, shapefiles about the location of hazard events, either floods, droughts, dry spells, or storms, but also with an indication of whether or not they have had an impact on people, on agriculture, or on property. So if colleagues around the call have heard about this data, you know where we can find it. I will appreciate that very much. I will be very grateful if you can let me know. Happy to engage with you and try to bring that data into HDX. Hopefully it's not a PDF, but if it's in a PDF still, I would be happy to hear from you. And also, if you think that we are crazy, that it's not easy to get that information, by all means, let me know. Say, well, no, that's going to be hard. Maybe use a proxy. And I will be happy to also hear about proxies for this data, but it's something that we are looking. Also, what's coming next on XDX, as Sarah was mentioning, we want to be working towards revamping our spatial data that we have on XDX. We have a lot of data sets, a lot of shapefiles. They want to make them more friendly and usable for our community. And last but not least, also, we want to spend some time improving the way that we are signaling the data quality of our data sets. So, data sets are not perfect, and also quality is very relative. So it depends on what use you want to give to the data, but still you want to give some indication of how users can use A or B or C data sets from the platform so they can take better decisions and more evidence-based decisions. So I think that was my last slide, Suji. Can you go next? I think that's it. So I stop here and over to you, David. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Javier. And Sarah, I do want to go back. We titled this Building a World-Class Data Platform, and you kind of said you were a bit cautious to call it that. I mean, based on what you guys have shown us, I would reinforce how amazing this is and just give you guys all awards for the wonderful work you've done. This is really fantastic. And as Pooja said in the chat, your commitment to data quality and verification, and I mean, everything you're doing here is really cutting edge. So just hats off, chapeau, well done. Let's go to the chat now, and I'm not going to let you respond to that. Just take the compliment. This is fantastic. There was a couple questions coming in from Kamal. Kamal, do you want to set your camera on and ask your question? Kamal, are you still with us? If your microphone is off, can you turn it on, please? Maybe he has departed. I will ask his question. Are the APIs pull automated to the portal or only share out? And do you have trust portals that you bring data from without verification?
Yeah, I mean, the API works both sides. So either to pull data to XDX or to push data out. So you can query our API and download the data that you need. we do validate everything. I mean, we make sure that the data is relevant for the community, and we check for that. Of course, the accuracy, for example, we can make sure that if in the case of Ukraine, if UNICEF says there are 6.6 millions in Ukraine, we can validate that. So we just make sure that the users can read the methodology that they use, that the frequency of updates, and so on. The same with the IDPs. There are at the moment 8.0 IDPs coming inside Ukraine, but we are not sure. We have no means to verify that. But we share the methodology. We say IOM has used 2,000 telephone interviews to come up with this estimate, and it's totally up to you if you use that number or not. But we do validation for every single data set for every organization, no matter who they are.
Thanks very much, Javier. Another question sort of goes back to Sarah's slide about user-centered design. We had our last digital discovery session on user-centered design. I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit about kind of the design process you used, and what kind of feedback have you received that you were able to take into account from your users?
Sure. I mean, I didn't mention that actually, but yeah, I mean, in the takeaways on the case study, that was one of the big things. But when we first started, we, well, I guess I looked around at the different platforms that existed and thought the main thing about them was they were all really hard to use. And also very poorly designed and, quite frankly, kind of ugly. So I thought, well, if we're going to do this, then we really need to make this easy and beautiful. And I was always very visual. So I thought that would be important. So we engaged with Frog, which is a company in New York, and we did I think it was actually 10-week engagement. And that was, that was foundational, and I think that has everything to do with our success, because they really thought through what this would look like and gave us the initial designs for it. And the designer that we worked with then joined our team later, Yumi Endo, and she's still with us, although she's on a maternity leave right now. We miss her. But that foundational design is still there and part of our platform. But what I would say is what they did, they went to 2 countries. They went to Colombia and they went to Kenya. They must have talked to 100 people. We, really thought through. One of the things I loved was kind of giving the platform a persona. So if HDX was your friend, what would you want it to be? Like friendly, serious? Is it like mid-30 woman? Is it a bearded 20-year-old man? Like what is this? To try and kind of elicit. What is it you want to do when you come here? How do you want it to make you feel? And that I thought was also important. And in the end, it was like it needed to be friendly, but also open and but serious too. I mean, so really like trying to put all that together was really important in the beginning. And we still are doing user research. I mean, we did user research on the statistical disclosure control and data sensitivity work. We've done it at every kind of big feature on the data grids. We did some user research. So I don't think we would ever make a big decision about a new feature without taking the time to really hear from people about what they want.
And just following up on that question, I think some of our colleagues, when they get user feedback, sometimes it triggers a bit of a defensive reaction, or, that's not true. You can do this way and that way and this way. And mm-hmm. The ability to sort of listen and kind of admit, I think, some of our weaknesses, I think, is one of these mindset shifts. Did you face that challenge, and how did you sort of overcome that? Because ultimately, sometimes it is difficult having your product out there and getting all this feedback, and it can trigger sort of defensive reactions. So how did you overcome that defensiveness?
Yeah. I just never had it. So it wasn't something I had to overcome. I mean, I never felt defensive because it was, I think part of it is that it was started from scratch. It wasn't something that existed that we were trying to fix, right? It was like a green field that we just were creating something new. And then even when we got it out there, we did get some feedback. I mean, I remember in our Nairobi office, I don't know if you remember, Javier, but we used to do these like sessions with users. And I remember one was like, I don't know where I'm, on the homepage, looking at us, like watching the homepage and then saying, I don't know where to go to add data. And it was like the big red button that says add data, like that's where you go. But, it's like, okay, that still isn't obvious. So let's add it again somewhere, or, so, but I think we always just thought it was fun and funny and not like defensive.
That's great. That's wonderful that you started from that mindset. I can see there's a number of questions coming in. Let me just, if it's okay, if I can pitch it over to Yashwin. She had a couple of questions. Yashwin, do you want to unload with your various questions for the team?
Sure. Thank you so much for the great presentation, and it's purely a joy to watching everything. Very quick question. I think this actually comes to also to everyone's mind is, can your platform help to deal with we have seen clearly like a lot of pictures on data on humanitarian related actions and crises, but relating to those challenges, can your platform help to navigate to, for example, some root causes? And had your users been like requesting for this kind of like a function? The context I'm asking this is by looking at the root cause of any like a governance related challenge, there might be an issue of attribution, like who contribute to that. So naturally, we would face a situation and people disagree on the attribution. It might be more obvious perhaps in the environment field, like what is the human impact on environment? I know that Java was calling for inputs on climate impact on human, but on our side, we also have like this kind of constant question, what is the human impact? What has been the impact of the social economy and on environment? So as a result, we have seen different attribution methodologies. And then there's a question of harmonization. Maybe we could spend all the time for like different organizations to work on harmonization. But on the other hand, when it comes to very particular, like the root cause with some like a particular value chain, a particular like players to contribute to this kind of challenge, then it would actually need sort of like a court level of evidence to do it if we are going through to a particular like attribution. So there is always like an issue of balance. How do we deal with the need to dive into the root cause at the same time, make all the users engaging and feel comfortable as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yashwin. Difficult question, Sarah and Javier and Dan. If you want to tackle this one or let it stew and we can do it afterwards, let me know.
I mean, I'm happy to answer it. I don't know that I fully understand it in terms of the data that's shared or with the organizations and attribution that happens on HDX. We haven't felt that kind of root cause issue, but maybe you can write more in the chat or Javier, if you have an answer to that. But it's not something that I feel like we've grappled with.
It may be that we're looking at environmental trends and we're going to say, okay, what's the driver of this trend, right? So what is the root cause of environmental degradation? So we try to, rather than just looking at the symptom, what's the cause? And then the cause is multi-causal and like, how do we, the data sets you use are sort of fundamental in determining that root cause. And so how do we sort of attribute and bring them together? So maybe it's just that our context is slightly different from your context, but we can continue to explore that in the chat, and then we can come back to it maybe afterwards. I'm just looking through the various questions. I think we're good. So why don't we do
maybe sorry, David, just to say, I see the one on Frog. I'm happy just to quickly say, I mean, the team we worked with was quite large. It was probably 7 or 8 people. And yeah, like a product manager, designers, user researchers, technical specialists. I mean, the whole gamut of how you would set up a data platform. So that it was really, and let me just say, in terms of, I mean, you were asking before about defensiveness with the platform. I was never defensive about like the users, because we really felt like we wanted to hear from them, and we were creating this with them and all of that. But I did get a lot of pushback within the organization. So politically, sort of like, why are you doing this? Why are you getting money for this? Like, you know, that's where I think it can be challenging. And I remember when we went to the World Bank to learn about the open data initiative that they had, and they were, you know, years ahead of us, but they had a big change where they went from you had to pay for data to make it open. And so there was a lot of tension within the organization at the time, like, why would we get this for free when we make a lot of money from it? And I remember the guy that ended up, you know, really winning the argument around making it all open said, you know, you have to keep your blinders on, because there's going to be a lot of detractors as you do this. And there were a lot of them. And I think that's where I learned just to say, well, we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep trying. And also the idea of a senior champion, which I put in that slide, having a protector and someone who can fight the battles above is hugely important. If you have that, I think it can kind of help with the headwinds that you're going to get at a working level, resource jealousy, or, you know, why we're supposed to do that, or this is in our section, or, you know, all of that kind of silliness. But the thing on Frog was, you know, to be honest, we invested our first year budget, we got $1 million from Sweden and $500,000 from DFID. So we had $1.5 million. And Frog was almost $400,000, which is a huge amount of the budget. And I remember, you know, people thinking, oh, that's way too much. That's crazy. But my director got convinced through some presentations that we did. And also it was, you know, the investment, you know, was foundational to everything that we were going to do. And so I just like, well, we could either throw away 1.5 million, or, you know, invest this for 400,000 and really do the legwork on something that could then continue to exist. So exactly. Hopefully that's helpful. But
we had Craig Mills on last time from Visuality, and, you know, to be frank, they have all these private sector clients. We were competing with that. They sort of said something similar. You know, we would really only look at a partnership if it's above 250 to 400K, right? Like that's the band that they work on just to get into the door. And I think that's the expectation. If we're going to work with these world-class firms, that's what we have to bring to the table. One question, sorry, you might have mentioned this and I missed it, but is the entire platform open source? Is it on GitHub? Is it something we could potentially fork and borrow? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And that's something, I mean, perfectly timed for Dan to start talking about. I mean, we only have 15 minutes, so I don't think Dan will get through everything, but we have talked about that. I mean, in having a federated code sort of HDX system where you could sort of take our code and have what we call HDX like in a box, right? Here it is, and then you customize it, and then it's because there are so many others that want to do this, and then they come up with, you know, their own solutions, or they have a proprietary system, and it doesn't work. And I know, Dan, I think was it UNHCR that ended up using CCAN. So we do have calls with some of our partners to kind of help and say, all right, this is how we did this, and these are the custom features that we've developed. But that's certainly something we could explore with you. So maybe over to Dan.
Before you jump in, Dan, and we can extend this if you're able to, Dan. Normally, you know, these sessions last between an hour and a half. So I'm also happy to extend it a little bit if you can stick on with us, Dan, if that's a possibility. But just let me go back to your question, your point, Sarah. I think the UN system really struggles in terms of data integration across all the agencies, both spatial and non-spatial, statistical. Have you guys had conversations about offering this as the core data infrastructure for the UN family? What does that conversation look like?
We have not, because we haven't been asked. I mean, we've been sort of going to all of the, you know, UN, the data.org meetings and the, you know, next phase of that. At one point, I think they were referring to that as UNDX, sort of this next generation of a UN data platform. And we were like, well, what is that? Is that just a copy of what we're doing, or is it the same? Do you want us to play a role? Does HDX need to federate or, have a bigger umbrella. And the conversation just died out. Like, I don't know that we had the right person on the other side to really understand this. And then also, like I said, most people, they want to build their own thing. They don't want to inherit something else, and that's, I think it's a cultural issue, but it's like, we saw that in just, between the 50 of us here. I think we saw that with the Peace and Security Data Hub that was launched, right? And we were always very close with Christina Goodness, and, they were sharing data on HDX on like number of peacekeepers and, whatever they had. And they only had maybe 20 data sets. It wasn't a lot, but they really felt they needed to have their own hub. And they went ahead and did that. And then they really stopped sharing data on HDX. And in the end, it was like bad for all of us, because I think she moved on to another job. Now they have to maintain that, which is a lot of work, and they probably can't. The data on HDX is now, it's like a year out of date. And you just think, well, that wasn't good,
I hear you, and I think you only want to build your own platform if you haven't had the experience of building one. Because if you've had the experience, you know what a pain in the ass it is.
Yeah. And maybe to say one other thing is that we just did a Q&A, and maybe you can drop it in, Javier, with Meta for Good, so Facebook, and we interviewed their head of their social data for good initiative, Laura, and she said the reason that they love HDX was that they didn't have to build their own platform and create their own community. They could just share the data on HDX and sort of like take advantage of a community that was already there. And if a multi-billion-dollar company has the foresight to do that and not have to build their own, because they could have, right, without any issue, just put up their own site and like, this is where you go for data for good. But instead, I think their approach really made sense. I mean, we had our hesitations about taking basic data onto the platform, but once we got over that and we really understood what the data was, I think it's a great success story, and it's a really good example. So it could be, and I don't know the work that you're going to do there, but that, instead of either copying and federating HDX for some of your kind of platform needs, or, coming onto HDX as an org, and then, using that as your main sort of public-facing data sharing initiative. So different options there. But
thank you so much, Sarah. Let's I'm sure we could continue this for ages, but let's pitch it over to Dan for the final presentation. Dan, you've got sort of 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a final round of questions and answers. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you for the invitation. I hope Suji can still share the presentation, otherwise I can try to do it. Suji, can you do it, or I should share my screen?
I guess you can go ahead, Dan. I don't know where she went.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Better.
Okay. Thank you, Suji. Okay, so my name is Dan Mihaela, and I'm the development lead for the HDX project since 2014. And I will try to present you the ecosystem that we built for HDX and what are the major features. In the first slide, you can see that SICAN was designed initially as an open source online data catalog, and now it's promoted as an open source data management tool. Basically, it can catalog, store, and allow access to data sets with a rich front end, but also provides a very powerful API. Our SICAN core functionality can be used by external code or scripts via the SICAN API. This is based on core code, on core extensions, and also provides other extensions developed by the community. And we also integrate in our SICAN extensions that were developed by other organizations, not only the core extensions that are coming with SICAN. And also SICAN is coming with a default set of metadata fields. It's completely customizable in theming or this metadata and also has a set of access permissions based on organizations and end users. In the next slide, we can see now how, let's say, HDX ecosystem looks like. It is based on SICAN, and on top of SICAN, we build several extensions and services. First is the geodata preview, which allows users to have a quick preview of the geodata that is uploaded into SICAN, and I just pasted in chat above some links. We also have the quick charts, which is a quick preview of the tabular data, and I will go details in another slide later. We have the freshness service, which allows users to have a good understanding on how up to date are the data sets. In parallel with this freshness, we developed the quality assurance dashboard, which is used by quality assurance officers. And we have the two main services. They are called PII and SDC. I think Javier just mentioned them, to scan all the uploaded data for sensitive content. During the lifetime of HDX and while we developed it, we improved the infrastructure and made the separation between the UI and the backend. So we implemented the full responsive theme designed by the Frog company. We also added some functionalities which support integration with external visualization. We realized that it's not always let's say, beneficial to develop our own visualization inside SICAN, but we can host and be developed by the other colleagues and hosted outside SICAN, and we just integrate. We also did some custom pages that can be built using the UI by our colleagues, and also improved a bit the special dataset permissions. And also we had some development with custom theming for organization pages. In the next two slides, I will show you how the data can be pushed to HDX. First, in this slide, you'll see that data is coming into HDX via user interface. And what we did is a big improvement compared to the default SICAN flow. First, the user can choose the type of data set. If it is a full data set with resources, with metadata, or it's just a data set with metadata only, and no resources that are created. But these files can be shared with other users by request. For regular data sets, the users have the choice of uploading a file or link from an external service, like Google Drive, Dropbox, or another service or server that hosts the data. The add data, or how we call it, contribute form, is one pager, and this is another advantage, because the users can see the existing resources, they can reorder them, but they can also fill the fields of the metadata. Everything is in one page. One last, for example, improvement that we did is like we are preloading the form, the HTML form, let's say, is transparent for the users, and this improved a bit the user experience, because the form, which is a bit heavy, is just loaded like instant for the user. The next slide will show how the data can be bring into HDX via API. And I mean, it can be used via or using scripts, and we are calling our own scripts scrapers. And these scrapers can read data from partners API or from shared files, and they are running on a schedule. These scrapers can create or update datasets, which includes metadata on one hand, and on the other hand, the files. And because the HDX API is very powerful, it also allows scripts to perform the same actions like the user, the humans in the UI, the same behaviors and the same actions. The next slide, it's about the quality of the data. every time a contributor edits or uploads a resource, there is an automatically service or bot which detects the change of the resource and triggers a service called DLP, data loss prevention, which scan the resource. The service will also flag if resource contains sensitive content, and the quality assurance officer can confirm or reject the prediction that is done by this. This is a service from Google DLP, but it's enhanced with other rules and customization from our side. In the next slide, we can see the automatically service, which is called the quality assurance data freshness. And this service helps us to determine how up-to-date datasets are on HDX. Every night, the datasets on HDX are examined one by one, and update frequency field is compared with the time since last updated. And basically, we have 4 statuses that are flagged by our freshness service. One is called fresh, due, overdue, and delinquent. Users can also see how up-to-date are datasets of interest in the UI. You see the green leaf on the screen, but also they can be notified via email and HDX notifications. And I will show you later what are these notifications. The next slide shows us how geodata is previewed and actually transformed into HDX. So basically, a user uploads a geodata file, a task is created in Redis queue, and this transforms the data and pushes it into the spatial DB, the PostGIS that we are using. And when a user logged in or logged out, I mean, it loads the public dataset page, which has geodata preview enabled. The browser basically is making a request to our vector tile server. The database is queried and is getting a response. And now browser is going to receive the requested vector tile in a simplified and also compress the response to allow speed and not to block user's browser. We are not displaying all the information from the beginning. You have to zoom in or to zoom out to get more details on the map. Next, we are going to show you the other two quick, one quick preview of the data. And this is because HDX is fully supporting the Hexel standard. And this is basically a way of enriching tabular data with some humanitarian vocabulary. Based on these vocabulary tags and some rules or recipes that we wrote, HDX is building charts, different types of bar charts, line charts, or what we call key figures, like a big number that is telling you more information about that data. It is important that we also design this in order to allow users to customize. So users can customize, change colors, sorting, or different other customizations. And then they can export to be and can be embedded in their platform. So you'll get a final URL that you can insert in your platform, or you can download that customized image or quick charts as an image or PDF. In parallel, we also developed a data check service, which can check in tabular data for place names, for P codes, for data consistency. It also generates a report that can be shared and also allow users to check the errors in the UI. And also, it's not easy, but users can write some custom validation rules in addition to what we have in case they want more validation to happen. In the next slide, this is the analytics module, which is gathering data and help us to informed decision and future development. Basically, the module is focusing on events and not really on users. We are track users on different devices. And I think what it is also important is that this data is not used only by the HDX team, but it also on each organization page, you have a tab where you can see the numbers for page views, for visitors, for number of downloads per data set. And this is, I mean, the flow of integration is quite simple, and it includes API calls from the browser or directly from backend from SICAN into Mixpanel server, which is our tracking tool. It's more a bit complicated that SICAN is actually pulling the data from Mixpanel and doing this kind of reports and aggregates the data to be displayed on the organization pages. Okay, in the next slide, we have the notification module, which is basically just a top right corner bell that can give you actually a lot of information, and there are several advantages that I want to highlight. Users can see how up to date are their own data sets, and if there are data sets that are under review by our QA officers because they have maybe sensitive data or any other issues. If there are any requests that are done for data sets that don't contain resource, you remember the metadata only data sets that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. If there are new membership requests from users to join your organization, and I think it's important that this little module helps data contributors to quickly find out what are the main issues with their data, and especially with organizations. And it helps them to maintain the data quality and also to reply faster to other user requests. And I think the last slide is going to give you like high overview of our infrastructure. Basically, we're hosted right now because we did that. We had some changes and improvements in our infrastructure. We are hosting it right now on Amazon, on the AWS. We have in front of our web servers the load balancer and other web servers, as you can see in the diagram. There is the Solar Cloud used to index information and allow a very fast search from the user. The database cluster, the S3 file storage, which is used for uploaded files. And we also have Redis, which is a queue that is used for some tasks for geo preview, for scheduling, but also for caching, which after we started to use this, it improved a lot also the user experience, making the pages loading fast and other computations. And I think this is my presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Fantastic and detailed presentation, Dan. Really appreciate the deep dive into the architecture. I think a lot of people, especially Kamal, not to point out anybody, but found that extremely interesting because these are some of the big questions we're now looking at in terms of our own design. I want to open up the floor to any further questions that might want to be posed to Dan or any of the panelists. I think if I could just kick this off, the one question I'm having is, as you pointed out, I think, Sarah, there's too much data often and we get overwhelmed, right? And so this question of like trust metrics, like which data sets are your users mostly using and which ones, is use a proxy for trust? Can you get a sense? Do you have any metrics which sort of help users trust the data sets that they're pulling down or using?
I'm sorry,
And I guess that question is also kind of like when you have two data sets that have sort of a similar theme, do you guys pick and choose, or do you just basically post both of them and allow the metadata and the methodology to, you know, to be there so that users can sort out which one they want?
Yeah, and sorry, can you hear me now? I've had a technical glitch. It's a hard question. Trust is hard to measure. I would say the way that we do it now, and Javier had laid that out in terms of the data grid criteria, is almost a proxy for trust, right? To say, all right, is it fresh? Is the file accessible? And is it subnational? And, you know, is it more relevant? So yeah, I think that's one way, but that's something that we're looking at now. And we have a project in the works with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And they're the first organization that has ever come to us and said, we really want to have a way to indicate whether the data that's being shared is accurate or trusted, because that's you know, how HOT works. It's like community tasking that's done, and so in some countries it's very good, and in other countries it isn't. And the way that Javier figures that out is he asks the information management officers in a certain location to say, are you guys using this? Is this the best available? But obviously that's a conversation that Javier is having one-on-one with people, and we use that to say, yes, it can go into the grid, and yes, it can be considered complete. But I think at a platform level, we're not really sure. And one thing that I've been playing with in my own mind is sort of how we maybe had not a quality rating, because I think quality is something that we also look at just in terms of metadata completeness and sort of all the things around the data. And I think accuracy is something that we would also have trouble saying whether it's accurate, and so would everyone else, because they're not in these locations. But confidence, to me, and maybe it's trust, but trust seems a little bit softer. But yeah, confidence. What's the level of confidence in the data? And we have thought about having user-generated thumbs up or commenting, or, you know, but we just haven't quite figured that out. And I think commenting is problematic for a number of reasons, because you'd have to moderate it, or maybe we'd only let certain editors of trusted organizations do it. We also have thought about having a premier status program for trusted organizations, so that way they would have like a fast track through our QA process to say, all right, well, we know you're a trusted organization and you're not going to be sharing these other types of data sets, so you can be fast tracked. And I was actually thinking about it when I was in the line at JFK the other day for an hour and a half, thinking, I wish I was fast tracked right now. So I think that could be interesting. And then as a result of being like a premier org or like a trusted org, that some of that data and would trickle down as also being trusted. But I don't know, Javier, you're the statistician. What do you think?
Thank you. No, I think you covered everything very well. Maybe just to address that point that you made, David, of what we do when we have two data sets that maybe they are measuring something similar, and how we deal with that. So again, we go back to the metadata. So a case could be data about food security, that we get data from FuseNet, but also from IPC, and maybe sometimes from another source. They could easily live on HDX. You know, it's as I said, the quality is relative, and not every data set is fit for what you want to do. So we leave that to the users to read the methodology, to see maybe the data set from FuseNet is more up to date but less granular, whereas the IPC is maybe covering the conflict area and is and can be comparable with other countries. So it's certainly up to the users, but that's why, again, it sounds repetitive, but that's the beauty of metadata. Without metadata, we couldn't let the user take that decision. So, but both data sets live, and there are many cases like this on the platform, and the rest you cover perfectly. So over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Javier. I think there's two more questions, then we can wrap it up, and I appreciate staying longer. I think, Javier, when I first met you, and I think it's CJ, you guys talked about one of the critical success factors was having humanitarian data officers on the ground. that they were kind of a key beacon to, get the data and engage. Can you just give us a sense of, is that still the case? And what would be your advice for UNEP in terms of like, how should we structure ourselves between headquarters and regions and countries to kind of, copy your success?
Yeah, I remember, David.
Sorry, Javier, before you go on, and I know that maybe it'll take 5 minutes to wrap up. I'm in an interview panel and they're waiting for me. So I have to go, but I wanted to say thank you so much. And thank you for having us. We're happy to help as you take forward your data journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. And congratulations again.
Bye. Oh, thank you. Bye.
Bye, Sarah. Yeah. So yeah, I was saying, I remember we were in that room, very nice room at the Palais. So I think one of the key movement that we have done is to really engage with our colleagues in the field. So already for 2 or 3 years, I have been holding calls with our OCHA colleagues in the field, but also with the IM community. So I don't know if there is something similar in your area that you can also engage at that level, because the success has been a combination of engagement with the field, but also a lot of advocacy at the HQ levels. And we have many cases when they say, oh, in the field, it's so hard to get the data about the DTMs for Nigeria. So can you help us? And then I go here in Geneva, I go across the street with our colleagues from IOM, with Risky and Nuno and all these guys. And they say, can we get that DTM? They say, yeah, absolutely. Here it is. We put them on HDX and we solve that problem. On the contrary, also, sometimes we try to get data from WFP about certain road networks, and they say, no, we can't get that. So we have to go all the way down to Afghanistan, talk to the colleagues there, go to the IM. That the beauty of our sector is that, and I think everywhere, we love meetings. So there is a meeting all the time, and they get together and they have these IMWGs. So very often you will find us presenting there, or also with the presence that we have in Jakarta, in Dakar, in Nairobi, or in different parts, our staff joining those IM sessions, present the benefits of data sharing, present the benefits of having data on one single platform, and from there we engage and we convince them to share the data and to put it on next day. So it's kind of like a combination of pushing locally, but also trying to get some liaisons and some engagements and commitments at the HQ level. But only like this, having presence, and also, as Sarah was mentioning, having data champions. So we believe on that kind of definition. So people that really believe on not only on the platform, but also on the power of sharing data. So and we have a nice list of data champions that without them we couldn't be where we are and have the data sets that we have on the platform.
Well, thank you for that. I know we need to wrap up, so I will stop taking questions from the chat. And just from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of UNEP, thank you so much, both for building this platform, but also then for sharing the lessons. I think we have a huge amount to learn from you. I think you've inspired us all. And again, like, hats off for building. I do maintain world-class data platform. So thank you again. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Javier. And thank you, Dan. A little applause. Please take a bow, and we'll be in touch about how we can enhance our collaboration. Thanks again, guys.
David, looking forward. Be in touch. Thanks. Bye for now. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much,
Thank
guys.
you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sujin. Bye for now.